foreign workers have been forced to live in crowded, substandard housing and work long hours in unsafe conditions for low wages. Are they at that table? Investigation, reduce spending. We don't really have a problem with it. Let's talk about Canada's farm work program. Last week, 96 Jamaicans left the island to take part in the Seasonal Agricultural Workers Program, which Jamaica has been a part of since 1966. Since that time, thousands of Jamaicans have taken part in this program, and many of them have been able to improve their lives significantly because of this opportunity. But the program is not without its flaws, and in recent years it has come under tremendous criticism, with even the United Nations describing Canada's use of migrant workers as a breeding ground for slavery. So let's talk about Canada's farm work program and some of the issues that are causing concern. When the program started in 1966, Canada wanted to fill a huge gap for workers in its agricultural sector. But just like the US, it was the black people from the Caribbean who they saw as a cheap labor force that could fill that gap. Around that time, there was very high unemployment in Jamaica. So of course, the program was sold as the answer to many people's dreams. But even though Canada had this need for the black workers from the Caribbean, they didn't want to increase the black population in Canada. So they adopted the same model that exists in the US and that now exists in Japan with the trainee program, whereby seasonal workers are tied to a specific employer and must return home after that seasonal work period is over. The workers pick fruits and vegetables on Canadian farms, some work at meat processing plants, and serve as the backbone of an industry that's worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Under the program, they work for up to 8 months a year, and many workers go back and forth for many years. Now, we know that farm work programs have become the sustenance for many Jamaicans, especially rural Jamaican farmers. You probably even know someone who has lifted themselves out of poverty due to their participation in a farm work program. But it's far from being a bed of roses. Foreign workers have been forced to live in crowded, substandard housing and work long hours in unsafe conditions for low wages. They're often threatened with deportation or even barred from future participation if they raise any concerns with their employer. This is what happened a few years ago to a group of Jamaican workers after they protested their working and living conditions. After the workers shared a video showing clogged toilets and wastewater flowing in their living area, they were all expelled from the farm. And this happened the same year that 3 Jamaicans died while on the farm work program. When it hit the news, Jamaica's government sent a delegation to Canada to investigate. Unsurprisingly, they came back with a report that though there were some slight issues, most of the farm workers were satisfied with the conditions, and therefore so was the government. The truth is, countries like Jamaica are in no position to bargain with Canada about how it treats our citizens. University professor Cindy Hahamovich has done extensive research into the guest worker programs in the United States and Canada. Officials in sending countries might have been sincerely concerned for their countrymen working abroad, but they also feared that if they intervened too much on their behalf, they risk jeopardizing those foreign work opportunities and the remittances they generated. And because there are some successes, it allows local politicians to use things like the farm work program as campaign fodder to say that yes, they're providing some kind of employment for people in the community. In fact, many people who participate in farm work programs sign up at the MP's office. But we need to talk more about the people who are not so lucky. People like Jaleel Stewart, who died last year at the age of 49. Jaleel's hand was mangled by a forklift in 2008 while he was working on a farm at Niagara-on-the-Lake. Though he received compensation for the first 2 years, the payment stopped because they decided that he was able to return to work even though his health continued to deteriorate. Jaleel passed away in January 2024, still awaiting compensation. Far from being isolated, Jaleel's case is one of many documented by Justice for Migrant Workers, a rights group that has launched a $500 million class action lawsuit that accuses the Canadian government of relying on cheap labor and turning a blind eye to reports of abuse and discrimination. It said injured workers were faced with docked pay or were forced to return to work before they were healthy. In some cases, they were sent back if they tried to access health care or any workplace compensation. This is a story of the migrant worker, whether they be in Canada, the United States, or Dubai. And because of the imbalance of power between Canada and Jamaica, we get stories like this that paint the program as one of roses and success. And we hear less about the people who have been permanently disabled or even lost their lives because of it. These guest worker programs are performing exactly as they were designed, to hold down costs in the industries they supply. In the process, they have drawn nations together in a new sort of dependency in which the world's wealthy nations rely on foreigners to do their hardest and dirtiest work, and in which poorer nations depend on earnings abroad for their very survival. Guest workers seem to accept this lot most of the time, glad to have the work and anxious not to lose it. But when they have demanded more, they have discovered that a few well-placed deportations is the surest way to squelch a strike. In a perfect world, our government would be advocating for fair treatment for its citizens instead of downplaying the very real cases of abuse and discrimination that have been documented on these programs. Instead, we're led by people who, after they've sold out the country's resources, they're now selling people's bodies, and Jamaicans are unwittingly signing themselves up for modern-day slavery just so they can, quote-unquote, make it in a life.